This part felt so certain, each step entwined with the vision I carried. I worked, I prayed, I offered what I had, and thought that was my safety net, my warranty. Now I stand in the ruins of something I believed would unfold, something we crafted, that now feels like dust. Was it by my hands or yours that caused this unraveling? Or was it something you had already planned entirely and kept me in the dark? The finish line was so clear and tangible, though. Now it mocks me from a distance I can no longer measure. I try reach for it in my mind, but the force of reality shakes the ground beneath me, pulling me further away. Pride and fear tangle in a silent dance, each shuffle forward wrapped in doubt. I must be a failure to have reached this point for nothing, having to pack up, turn around, and start again. A setback isn't a start over. The detour is still a continuation of the story with a different path. This plan was woven from the start. Your plan. I just didn't see it yet. I still don't. But still I move. Hesitant, but not without trust. Hopeful in a season that some would see as barren. Knowing this journey is not mine to finish alone. And that distance will never be made clear to me, as that leaves nothing but more room for faith and trust in you. I know you're not done yet. And that breaks us into today's episode of Derailed but Not Defeated. I'm sure many of us have had moments of, being derailed in life, and we have felt defeated. We have felt like a failure, whether it was to ourselves, to the people around us, to God. We felt like, okay, did everything I just do, was it for nothing? And most of us don't realize that sometimes God sends you to be derailed for a reason. Like that detour, that derailing is literally a blessing in disguise. It was literally part of his plan from the start. But when we look at it, when it comes in front of us in our journey, we're like, oh, is God punishing me? Is this meant to delay me? Like, you look at it and you're like, okay, God, what did I do wrong? And we often are swarmed with so many questions and so many feelings of fear and pride. Like, some of us can hear God's voice saying, okay, let's take this way. Let's maybe start over. Let's take a different route this time. And we often look at it and we think to ourselves, but I don't want to. Like, what are people going to think of me? Like, is everything I've done so far for nothing? Was it in vain? We are wrapped with so many questions and those feelings because we can't see past what's in front of us. But God can. And God already knows what he worked out. And that detour was part of the plan from the beginning. In Isaiah 55, verse 8 to 9, it says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." In this one sermon I was watching during the week, I can't remember the pastor's name right now, but I will tag it in the description. The pastor was talking about, the story of, the storm during the ship and all the disciples being so scared while Jesus was sleeping in the boat. That story. And no one realizes, I didn't even realize this till that pastor pointed it out. In Matthew, it mentions how when they got in the boat, they were set to go to Bathsheba, if I'm not mistaken. And then in Matthew, they ended up in a completely different place. And no one really picks that up, but the pastor mentioned how sometimes God will send winds and send storms to derail you and send you on a different path because he needs you to be at a different destination. Or he needs you to be at that destination to meet different people. But whatever the reason is, God knows it. And even though to you, you look at yourself and you're like, I missed my destination. I I'm now being detoured and I'm going to be late. You literally look at the detour and you question and you're like, God, I'm not going to meet my goals at the specific timeline I had set out for myself. I was supposed to do this at 26 years and now it seems like I'm only going to reach it when I'm 35. And we often think that because we only have such short wisdom and such short knowledge, and we can only see so far. But God can see so much further, and He has already seen so far, and He has already paved the way and had everything planned out. And when we look at His detour as a mistake or a punishment, we don't see the blessing in it, and we become discouraged. And I mean, it's understandable, but at the same time, we need to understand that nothing God does will ever be to forsake us. In Philippians 1 verse 6, it says, "And I am certain that God who began the work within you will continue his work until it is finally finished on the day when Christ Jesus returns." That detour was a blessing. And whatever God has planned for you and whatever God has woven in your path in life and whatever promises he has promised for you, trust me, God will see it through to the end. Even though, hey, sometimes it will take 3 years, sometimes it will take 10. But however many years it takes, trust me, it's meant to unfold just the way God has planned for it to unfold. Like, it's a different story when our own disobedience lays us. But when you're obedient and when you're genuinely listening to God and praying and fasting along with it, and then that detour comes, you really feel like, yo, I'm a disappointment. Like, what did I do wrong? But trust me, your obedience is what was so important in it. Because trust me, God sees it and God already knows that, look, this detour, this derailing, this setback isn't meant to harm you. Just trust God. And I'm in that season in my life now where I feel like I'm completely being set back. And I really had to shift my perspective because I was either gonna be set back and mope and be upset, or I'm gonna be set back and be like, okay, let's see, God, where are you taking me now? God, where can you still use me? Like, I feel like sometimes we forget that when we gave our lives over to God, we sacrificed our lives to Him. And I feel like we often forget that when we plan out our futures and our goals. And I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm just saying that you need to be open and understanding to the fact that as Christians, when we surrendered our lives over to Jesus, we made a commitment to Him. And oftentimes we forget about that commitment. Like, yes, we make our goals and our dreams. And I'm not saying we shouldn't. But what I am reminding us is that we became vessels for Christ. When you give your life over to God, it's in there. You give your life over. And it's not your life, but His. Meaning sometimes God is going to put your goals and your dreams on pause just for a little detour because He needs you, specifically you, to do something somewhere else just for a short period of time. He needs you to go and touch that one person's heart, which means putting your own goals and dreams aside for a second. But you also need to understand sometimes your goals might be put aside for a minute, for a hot minute. I remember the same pastor sermon that I was talking about is I've never heard anybody talk about being a pastor the way he has. Like, I've seen pastors talk about, okay, I'm doing God's work. And, some people say it's easy, some people say it's not. But the way he talked about it, he was like, this is a sacrifice. It's an everyday sacrifice to put my life out there, to put my family's life out there. And sometimes he doesn't feel like it, but he still does because he's doing it for God, not for himself. And as Christians, that's something that we have to also learn, is that we are vessels. And sometimes God is going to call us to do things that you might not think that you're suited for, or you might not think that it's something you're supposed to do. But trust me, God can see you in a way and a light that you don't see yourself. And if we're going to be disobedient and not be vessels, we're delaying someone's salvation. Because what if you were meant to go speak to that one specific person who was meant to do something great, but because of your disobedience of, oh God, I need to put my dreams first. Oh God, I wanted to achieve this first. And now we caused someone else's salvation. Like, I get sometimes we have goals and dreams that still align with like God's like kingdom, and it's for God's kingdom. But sometimes, even though you might think, okay, God, I personally think I have the gift of discernment, you never know. What if you have the gift of prophecy and you just haven't realized it? You haven't allowed God to put you in that space for your gift to flourish. And you won't be able to until you give God that space to, until you actually make yourself a full vessel. Like, sometimes as Christians, we know God has a promise for us, but we don't have the patience. We lack the patience to wait for it. Another story I want to put into perspective with you guys is how when Abraham and Sarah was struggling to have kids, Abraham went to his slave wife to have a child because, I mean, he wanted a son, and he got Ishmael by the slave wife. But then God then actually did fulfill the promise that he had set out to Abraham. Look, I was going to give you a son with your wife. And then God does give him the son. He gives him Isaac. And you know what God tells him to do with the slave wife and Ishmael? He tells him to send them away, that they will not be inheriting the gifts. And I read that verse and that story like a while back. And recently in, I think it was Galatians 4, verse 23, it said, the son of the slave wife was born in a human attempt to bring about the fulfillment of God's promise. And I read that and I was like, I never viewed it in that way. Like, oftentimes us as people, believers and non-believers, is we have this promise that, we pray to God about, and we're like, okay, God, it's not coming. When is this gift coming? And then we try and fulfill it in our own way. We try and bring it about in our own strength. And even though we might achieve it, or we might achieve a counterfeit of it, that literally becomes non and void. It becomes worth nothing, because then God will still give you a gift and he's going to say, oh, look, that like fake thing, that counterfeit promise you made, send it away. It's worth nothing. All that effort you did to try and get it was worth nothing, because I was working behind the scenes and you didn't trust me enough. You didn't wait enough to get it. And it's so sad when that happens. So I just want to encourage us as Christians with this is, for one, when God has a promise set out for you, when you have these goals and these plans, don't get discouraged when you feel like God's taking long. Don't get discouraged when all your circumstances around you seem like, God's not working on my promise. I've been unemployed. I've been like struggling financially. I've been hopping from year to year to year. I've been constantly getting fired. Like, whatever it is, whatever it's about, regardless of your circumstances, just constantly fix your eyes on Him. And it will help you with your patience. It will help cultivate the fruits of your spirit. And in due time, in His time, God will deliver His promise. Secondly, I want us to understand and change our perspective when God derails us, or when He sets us back, or when He tells us to start over. I want us to change our perspective and not look at it as, God, I failed. But rather, okay, God, what can we do differently this time? Okay, God, what should I take from that experience that I should keep? What should I, does God, ask God to change your perspective with things, to be more grateful and view it as a blessing. Trust me when I say your life, regardless of your circumstances, will completely be uplifted. And thirdly, I just want us to completely learn to surrender and be okay with God using us as a vessel, and be okay with sometimes having to put our dreams and goals in the back seat to fulfill His kingdom. I mean, it's in His Word. Seek first my kingdom. Seeking first His kingdom includes making yourself a vessel and allowing Him to work through you. So I want you guys to take that during this week. Carry it with you. Carry those verses with you. I'll repeat them. It's Isaiah 55, verse 8 to 9, Philippians 1, verse 6, and Galatians 4, verse 22. Really carry those verses with you in times of doubt or sadness or fear. They really, really become good motivations through those times. So, guys, that is it for today's episode of Derailed but Not Defeated. I really hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you guys are new, hi, welcome. I hope you enjoyed. If you are a returning visitor, you know the deal. Like, share, subscribe. Guys, please share this like podcast with everybody you know. I'm really trying to grow it. It's very new. So I know it might take time, but share it with anybody and everybody, okay? Like, even if you have like 5 followers, share it to those 5 followers. They need it. um I have a anonymous link in my Instagram, which is kind of open to like opinions, advice, questions, any topics you'd like me to discuss on the next episode, or just questions you'd like me to answer, whether it's private or if you just want to like DM me on my main page. My Instagram will be tagged in the description, in my main description, not in the episode description. There you will find the links for my Apple Music and my Spotify as well. If you guys just want to listen to the podcast and not the audio, like, you know, sometimes people don't like watching things. I think I'm one of those people. I'm not a YouTube person, just saying. Okay, guys, keep transforming and stay blessed. Thank you for listening.